And I believe the broadcast is live.
Thank you. Thank you everybody for joining. The presentation will be starting shortly. Just takes a minute or two to let all the registrants get in and log in. So we thank you for your patience. We will be starting in 1 or 2 minutes. I see that more people are logging in, so welcome everybody, and we will be starting shortly. I see a few more people joining, but I think that we can go ahead and get started. I'll start with the introduction, and so that leaves time for others to join. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Scripps Research Fully Interactive Resources for Students and Teachers, or FIRST. My name is Rosie Alvaran-Seckler, and I will be your moderator this afternoon. If you're joining us for the first time, and you're just not familiar with us, Scripps Research is one of the largest nonprofit private biomedical research institutes in the nation, and our mission is to develop the next generation of medicines and diagnostics to address the most pressing health concerns in the world, such as COVID-19. I want to encourage all of you to visit our website after the webinar, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email us or to contact us. And we hope that you enjoyed the webinar today. For today's presentation, we have 2 graduate students and a postdoctoral fellow who are going to be discussing issues of women in science, and they're also going to be talking about their journey into science and their research work. And feel free to, at the time of the question and answers, feel free to ask questions on all of these. Before we begin, if you have joined us before for a Zoom call, as you know, we like to touch on some housekeeping items. So all the participants' videos have been disabled and you have been muted. The only way that you have to communicate with us if you're on the Zoom platform is using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you're on Facebook Live, please use the comments box to ask any questions or to let us know of any comments. If you're liking it, please then give us a thumbs up. The format of the presentation today is going to be a 10 to 15 minute Q&A session between the moderator and the panelists, followed by another 10 to 15 minute Q&A where we're going to be taking your questions. Feel free to type in your questions at any time. We're just going to be answering on the second half of the presentation. And we also want to interact with you, especially if you're in the Zoom call. We're going to be able to do this via polls. And so you're going to see one coming up on your screen right now. And with the first set of questions, we want to get to know the audience. So we want to know who you are, if you're a high school student, if you're a college student, if you're a faculty member, a teacher, and also why are you here today? In the Facebook Live, feel free to answer these questions if you like on the comments box. We'll be adding it to our answers later. I'd like to share at this point the results of the poll for the benefit of our panelists. So most of the students seems that they're college students, but there's a good mix. There's high school students as well. And of course, educators. And also there's a mixture of reasons why they want to be here today. So they want to get to interact with you, the scientists, figure out if they can have a science career. They want to have their own specific questions. So welcome everybody, and thank you so much for having taken the time to answer this poll. So without further delay, I want to move in with our panelists today. We have graduate student Alicia Angelbello, graduate student Valentina Botero, and postdoctoral fellow Dr. Meredith Gardner. Thank you so much for making the time to join us today. And I think what we should do is that let's start by having you introducing yourself briefly to all the attendees. Say your name, the laboratory you're in, what undergraduate institution you attended, and a little bit about your research. And then after that, we can go into the questions. Let's start with Meredith, and then Ali, and then Valentina. So Meredith, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rosie. So as Rosie said, I am a postdoc at Scripps. I'm currently in Mike Farzan's lab in the Department of Immunology and Microbiology. I grew up in Missouri, and I went to the University of Missouri where I studied biochemistry as an undergrad. And then immediately after undergrad, I went on to grad school at Harvard, where I got my PhD in virology. My research at Harvard was mostly about innate immunology, in particular how things interact with how different proteins in the cells interact with viruses. And in my postdoc now for the last several years, I've been working on HIV and antibody-like inhibitors of HIV. Although for the past 2 months or so, I've been working on a project to screen for therapeutics against the COVID-19 virus.
Great, thank you. So, Ali?
Hi, everyone. I'm Ali Angelbello. I'm a fifth-year grad student in Matt Disney's lab in the chemistry department at Scripps, Florida. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and then went to college at Villanova University up in Pennsylvania, where I played college softball and majored in chemistry. I went to grad school immediately after undergrad and came back to Scripps, Florida. So in the Disney lab, I currently work on developing small molecule potential therapeutics for some genetic diseases that are caused by RNA repeat expansions. So these are diseases like ALS or myotonic dystrophy type 1, where we're trying to find small molecules that can potentially cure these diseases.
Great, thank you. And Val?
Hi, I'm Val. I'm a second year in the lab of Dr. Seth Tomczyk in the neuroscience department. I completed my undergrad at Mount Holyoke College, and I got my degree in neuroscience and behavior. And then following, I took a year off in order to work in a lab in order to see if this is really what I wanted. And then I started my graduate work, and now I work on a common neurodevelopmental disorder called NF1, and it causes a lot of cognitive dysfunction. So we're trying to figure out the interaction between the disease and certain types of neural metabolism changes. And that's basically what I've been doing for the last couple of years.
Great. So before moving on, I want to remind everybody that they can ask questions about your research, and they can also ask about, how do you know that you wanted to go to grad school, how to get involved in research, and so on. But as everybody knows, the title today of the presentation is Women in Science. And when I was researching, to conduct this discussion, I am a numbers person. I like to see the data. So I was looking into the question, do there still exist underrepresentation of women in science? This is a topic that always rises up when we have this discussion. And I actually looked for some data. There's a report that the National Academies released recently, and they confirmed that unfortunately there still to continue to be underrepresentation of women in science, particularly for women of color and for all women in certain fields and at different stages. So at this point, I want to ask our panelists, do you consider that there's still underrepresentation of women in science? And if so, what are some suggestions to overcome this? And let's start with Meredith again.
All right. Yeah, so I feel very lucky that at least in my cohort, my colleagues, when I was in grad school, we were over 50% female in our class. And I think across the board, when you look at graduate classes in the biomedical sciences in particular, it is about equal, if not more women than men at this point, it's because there have been a lot of programs put in place to try to keep women and girls in science from high school into college and on. But what I've noticed as I've gone through my career is that once you get to the higher levels, so at the faculty level, there really is a lot fewer there are a lot fewer women in the faculty levels than men. And there are a lot of different reasons for that. Some, although I hope, and I think that this is becoming less common, is like overt sexism and discrimination. But a lot of it also has to do with the fact that if you want to start a family, a lot of that pressure falls on a woman in the relationship. And so when you're trying to do a career that takes a lot of time and a lot of energy, and then also thinking about starting a family, it gets hard to balance those things. And at least for graduate students and postdocs, there's not a lot of like parental leave benefits that are guaranteed. So a lot of people put off having children until they are in the faculty level and or decide to not stay in academia and go into industry.
Great, thank you. So Ali?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Meredith said. I think that women are still underrepresented in a lot of scientific fields, especially more in chemistry and some other related fields. We're really fortunate at Scripps that the graduate students in the chemistry department are pretty well balanced between male and female. But like Meredith said, as you go higher into postdocs or even faculty members, women continue to be underrepresented. And I think a lot of this stems from the concerns that Meredith mentioned. So I think one way to encourage women to stay in science is to, reach out to different female mentors that are at similar career stages that you would one day like to reach. So this could be a faculty member that you can interact with and get advice about what kind of struggles they've experienced in their career and how to overcome this. Or even if you're an undergrad or high school, talk to graduate students that are in science and they can tell you about their experiences and how, what kind of things you might have to overcome.
That's great. Melvina?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Meredith and Ali said. I mean, I see this a lot just looking at PIs in our department. But even looking back and seeing the type of mentors that I had and the type of like what I saw as a scientist, it was mainly a lot of men. And I didn't really meet any successful female scientists until I got to graduate school or really late into my undergrad. But I think having obviously more representation in science could help the situation. Seeing, like Ali said, seeing women be successful and have a normal like work-life balance. But I also think that this shouldn't all fall on women. I think men should be able to help women achieve these, have these positions and also have the space for them. So obviously, men don't necessarily need to speak up for women, but I think they need to allow the growth for women to be there, maybe by supporting us a little bit more, especially when you're going through like the career transitions, because as Meredith said, it is very difficult.
Great, thank you. So basically you're touching on issues that are maybe more relevant at later stages of the career as a scientist. And we know that research shows that girls sometimes start to lose interest in science from middle school, high school. We know also that in the audience, we have some high schoolers, some college students. So what can you tell the students out there who they are passionate about science, but they might have some doubts and they're not sure if they can go on this career that, in their minds, they feel that it is very hard. So maybe you want to offer some advice to them, and let's do it in the same order, Meredith and Ali and then Val.
Yeah, so I'm a huge proponent for getting hands-on experience when doing science. I know, like for me, reading and like doing like chemistry equations and stuff, I found that personally interesting, but it was way more interesting to actually be able to do experiments and to get an idea of what a researcher does on a day-to-day basis and how it is as a career. So I think, for high school students and for college students especially, there are more programs available for internships or undergraduate research that you can do on your own campus. Those types of things were very helpful for me. I didn't have the opportunity to do any real research as a high schooler, but I did participate in some extracurricular activities, some of which that were geared specifically towards girls and women, which was really nice to be able to have that opportunity. But I really think that getting the hands-on experience of doing research is important both to learn what you like and also to learn what you don't like. So I did 2 internships during my undergraduate years, and one of them made me really rethink what I was going to plan on doing in grad school, and the other one really validated what I wanted to do. So I think getting diverse experience is very important.
That's great advice. Allie?
Yeah, I agree with Meredith that hands-on experience is really important. And I would also encourage, younger students, high school or undergraduates, that if you're interested in science in general, to kind of look for all the different career options that are available in science. I think especially in high school, we kind of learn really basic chemistry or biology, and it's not super easy to think of all the different career options that can, come from learning about chemistry or biology, or even majoring in those things. And so I would encourage people to look into all kinds of different career options and maybe get experience in many different things to try to see what you would like, maybe by reaching out to your high school or college professors to help gauge what kind of different experiences there are.
Great. Val?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can add to that is really just science is so broad and there's so many different fields. Like, you should try different things, right? I thought I loved chemistry, but I mean, I do love chemistry, but I'm really bad at it. And so I have this love, but I'm just not successful in it. And I can be successful in other ways, but that doesn't deter me from wanting to learn more about chemistry or, explore other options. It's just, you need to keep trying and have confidence in yourself. You'll figure it out if you really want this career, and you can try different things. It doesn't just have to be very textbook style.
Great. So I think one of you mentioned mentors before, and maybe you want to offer some advice on how to find mentors, especially in the sciences. Maybe it could be a potential research advisor. This is a question that we have gotten before from both high schoolers and college students. These mentors can also be people who are going to write recommendation letters in the future. So what advice can you offer about, how to establish mentorship relationships? And also maybe you can tell us a story about how mentors play a role in your academic and your career life. And let's start with Meredith again.
Okay. So I think mentorship is really very important at all stages. For me, like, fostering my interest in science was really two of my teachers in junior high and high school were really instrumental in that, and really pushing me to continue to go above and beyond what our curriculum offered, because they knew that I was interested. And then in college as well, so I did some undergraduate research, and the PI that I worked for was very helpful in directing me towards different things that I might be interested in. For me, I would say that most of my mentor relationships have been pretty organic. So I haven't really tried to find someone who is doing a particular thing. It's more been the people that I've been around and interacted with the most. And, I think that everyone at different stages can offer you very good advice, and you'll get different advice from different people. So talking to a lot of different people is helpful.
Great. Allie?
Yeah. Like Meredith said, my interest in science first started in high school with a bunch of teachers that were good mentors to me and, really got me interested in science. But I was really fortunate in undergrad to go to a small undergraduate college where we only had 30 chemistry majors in our class. So we really formed good relationships with most of our professors. And especially I did do undergraduate research at Villanova University, and my professor there was a really great mentor, someone that I could just talk to whenever. And what was really nice is that he wasn't just interested in, research going on in the lab, but he also offered great advice about the next career stages, gave me really honest, open advice about graduate school. And I think that's really important to look for when you're looking for a mentor, both in undergrad and then if you move on to graduate school, is to find somebody that's not just interested in your research and what you're going to produce for the lab, but also is going to support you at any career stage and support your future directions as well.
Great. Val?
Yeah, I mean, my high school mentors really helped me get to college, but I didn't actually become really interested in or even thought about a career in research until I was in college. And so my undergrad neuroscience professor was actually the one that really just took me under his wing and pushed me through to like look at these things that I was interested in. And like Meredith, I had really an organic relationship with all of my professors, but I think I got the most out of these relationships because I was willing to take the advice. I think it's really easy to just go to someone and be like, this is what I need, but you're not either ready to hear it or it's not what you wanted to hear. And so I think being able to be open with your mentor and ask them questions and be ready to hear honest feedback is really important. And that will push you to really look at what you want to do and either continue a career in research or not. And they also, my college mentors really helped me look at job applications and seeing if, you know, certain institutes would be good for me and how I work in certain situations, if I could be successful in grad school and what type of program I wanted.
Great. So before moving to the questions from the audience, I think we can touch on one last issue that, you know, research, my research showed that there's something called imposter syndrome that affects many women. I don't think that only affects women. I think it affects men as well, but it's definitely another issue that it's raised every time that they're discussing the topic of women in science. So I wanted to know from our panelists if you have heard of this, and if so, what can students out there do to overcome this? And let's go in the same order.
Yeah, so imposter syndrome for me is very real. It's something that I have to deal with a lot. I think I somehow was more confident when I was younger, and then as I've gotten older and learned more things, like somehow I know more, but I'm less confident in myself. Maybe because, you know, like there's way more information out there than any one person could ever know, and so you get a little bogged down on that. But I think for me, what's been very helpful is getting honest feedback from people, either from like classmates or colleagues or from my mentors. Like sometime, a couple of weeks ago, my PI actually just like randomly said something offhand. He was like, well, of course, you know, you did this great, but so-and-so commented on it as well. And I was like, oh, that's great. I needed that because I actually didn't feel like that interaction went very well. So things like that are really helpful. Like you don't want to fall into being needy and asking for feedback all the time, but to be able to have a relationship where you can say, oh, am I doing this well? Or what maybe should I improve upon? And I think also having your peers, I mean, everyone that I know deals with this. Even people that seem super confident have a little bit of kernel of imposter syndrome going on. So talking to them and saying, I'm feeling this way. And then usually they'll say, oh, we are too, and help you feel better about things that are going on.
Great, that's great advice. Allie?
Yeah, I think everybody in science experiences imposter syndrome at some point. And I know as a graduate student, I definitely experience it all the time. And like Meredith said, it's really great to be able to talk to your peers and open up and say, this is how I'm feeling. And usually they are feeling exactly the same thing, or they'll tell you what you're feeling is crazy and that you actually can do it and you are perfectly capable of doing whatever it is you're scared of. And even earlier in my career, I definitely recognized and felt imposter syndrome, especially when transitioning to undergraduate research. I kind of felt like I was expected to already know how to do research and already know how to do everything. And that definitely wasn't the case. And I was really lucky to have a supportive mentor that, you know, helped me overcome those feelings of doubt and imposter syndrome. But if anyone is experiencing that, I would encourage you to reach out to mentors or reach out to your friends. And usually people are feeling the same things.
Val, you have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, I, like Ali, had a lot of imposter syndrome when I was transitioning from high school to college and college to graduate school. And I used to attribute a lot of my own success to luck, not that I deserved the spot. And I think it's, you know, you need to realize that like these places that you're going to or these positions that you're gaining aren't, they're not they weren't luck. You earned them, and you need to be proud of that and just kind of push forward and show that you can maintain that spot and you're going to be successful in it. So yeah.
Great, thank you. I think now it's a good time to stop. We have our second poll, basically to get to know how we're doing. And like I said before, on Facebook Live, maybe if you are liking what you're are hearing, you can give us a thumbs up, or you can type your comments in the comments box. And also at this point is a good time for you to type in your questions. While you log in your answers, you can be typing your questions, and we're gonna be taking them after this poll. So they're enjoying your stories and the advice that they're getting from you. And they want to hear more about skills that they need to do a career in science. How does it feel to be a scientist in research? And what is it that you do in the laboratory? So great, thank you everybody for sharing that with us. And so I see that we have our our first question, which starts with my biggest. My biggest worry about continuing in science is being financially independent. I've heard from family members that unless you are a male or work extended hours, science does not pay well. Is this true? How can we support ourselves? That's a great question. And any of you can jump in to answer.
Okay, so I can just say for at least going to grad school, if you're in the biomedical sciences, you get a stipend. It's not necessarily a lot, but it's usually enough to get by. So you don't have to worry about working a job in addition to getting your education. And that's really great. As far as being in academia, the salaries are a bit lower than if you might find in industries like in pharma companies and things like that. But it's not that bad. And as you get so from a postdoc up, then the salaries definitely get better as well. So it's not really something that you have to be struggling. And these salaries are mandated by the NIH. So it has nothing to do with whether you are a male or working extra hours. If you have a position as a postdoc and you have 1 year of experience, you get a certain amount and it goes up by year. So those sorts of things are not necessarily a worry in the academic setting, I would say.
Great. I would say, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, and sorry, for in grad school, when you're, if you're looking into grad school, obviously you get the stipend, but you can also look at other benefits. Like we have really great health insurance, so we don't have to pay any copays or anything like that. So that's different maybe for every institution, but you can look into that where you don't have to worry about those extra expenses.
Yeah, and even though grad school everyone will tell you it is a lot of work, but I was shocked when I was applying to grad school that we even get paid to go to grad school, not like medical school or things like that where people may, go into debt for their education. We're, I think, really lucky that we're able to have a livable wage and still receive our education.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. And I also wanted to add that there's a realm of careers that you can have after finishing your PhD. And, the salaries, the spectrum is really broad. So I wouldn't be deterred to go into science just because of the potential salary. So let's see, there's another question. What is it like to work in industry and how can you start working in industry? If, I don't know if you have experience on this or not, but maybe you have some friends. And also they want to know if there's a difference between industry and academia, again, if you know.
Yeah, I don't have any experience working in industry, but a lot of my friends that have graduated from Scripps recently have worked in industry. And so depending on what kind of company or pharmaceutical companies where kind of the main goal is to, make drugs, make therapeutics, things like that. Whereas in academia, a lot of the times we're doing more basic research, maybe not trying to directly make drugs, but understand disease processes or things like that, where we're trying to, better understand this system so that people in the future can make drugs. And a lot of it is in academia, a lot of it is more publishing, more communicating your science with your peers, sometimes more teaching if you're a professor, whereas in industry, it's really more research focused and more focused on getting a product out to cure a disease.
Great. So I want to remind everybody to type in your questions, which you can do anonymously. We don't have any questions now, so maybe I can ask you guys to tell us a little bit of how you got involved with research in the first place. Maybe, you know, your interest was since middle school, high school, but, you know, when was the first time you got involved in research and how? And Meredith, if you want to start.
So my interest in science really started at a pretty young age. I think when I was in like the 3rd grade, I started getting interested in like the natural world and biology, and I was really into marine biology. So on our like family vacations, I always made my parents take us to an aquarium, and you know, I would tell them what all the fish were because I was, you know, a little nerdy, but you know, it's good. And so moving up, like at some point in, sorry, it's my cat. At some point in junior high, I started getting interested in virology. I think I read The Hot Zone and got, you know, interested in that. And then as I was moving through my undergraduate, I didn't want to focus too narrowly in the beginning. So that's why I majored in biochemistry. And I got a job where I got, you know, a little bit of money to work in a lab and worked on physical biochemistry and different proteins. And kind of decided that I enjoyed it, but I wanted to move a little bit differently. And so I did, like I said, a couple of different internships. One was in a pharma company and one was at the NIH working in virology. And I really liked that a lot. So that's why I, you know, further focused for my PhD in virology.
Great. Allie?
Yeah, so I first really got interested in science in high school. I had this really awesome teacher for our advanced chemistry class where we kind of got an introduction to organic chemistry, and I really, really liked organic chemistry, and so that's why I majored in chemistry in college. And then taking organic chemistry sophomore year was when I decided that I wanted to try to do chemistry research at Villanova. And I really loved doing research there. What really got me kind of hooked on research was that my professor, when he was explaining my research project to me, was kind of like, you're making new compounds in the lab that no one's ever made before. So you're doing all this new, really interesting stuff. And I thought that was super cool to be able to be involved in research that maybe no one's ever done before, no one's ever tried before. And I really love doing chemistry, but I wanted to learn more about, you know, how drugs work or how to make therapeutics for different harder to treat diseases. And that's kind of led me to Scripps and working more at the interface of chemistry and biology.
Great. Val?
Yeah, so I was always good at biology. I just never like really gained a love for it until I was in college. I thought it was going to be an architecture major, and I was actually taking a neuroscience class just to fulfill a science requirement. And I fell in love with the brain and how I could never actually understand it in my lifetime. And I just thought that was really interesting. And so my first research experience was actually in a psychology lab working with humans. And I quickly learned that that's not what I wanted to do in research. That it was not for me. So then I joined a neuroscience fly lab. Actually, it was an internship I did at Scripps. And I fell in love with the research, of the process of it, the great feeling you get when you find something out. But I also really enjoyed the frustration of not having something succeed. And so, you know, that really showed me that this was something that I could do for the rest of my life. And that's when I continued to pursue more neuroscience focused model organism research experiences.
Great, thank you. So we have more questions. The first one is, how do you manage work-life balance? I am hesitant to continue in science or research because of family responsibilities. So anybody wants to take on this one?
Well, I'm in kind of a unique situation where my husband and I actually work in the same lab. We met in grad school and then, started our postdocs in the same lab. So work-life balance is a little bit complicated in that respect. But it's good because I have someone that understands, like Val was saying, sometimes things are really frustrating. And so it's good to have someone that I can talk to about that. I think as a postdoc, I've gotten better at balancing things than I was as a grad student. Just personal issues and, we're trying to get done in a certain amount of time, I think, as a grad student. And so I worked a lot more hours and possibly considered unhealthy hours as a grad student. And then as a postdoc, it kind of like a little bit of pressure is off. So I've been better at that. I think that finding hobbies outside of lab are important, and having friend groups that have both scientists and non-scientists also good to keep a grip on what's going on outside of academia.
Great. I'm gonna move on because now we have more questions. So that was a good answer. What are different kinds of career paths coming out of grad school? So maybe you have some friends that already took different career paths. Anybody wants to jump into this one?
I think there's a ton of different career paths. I don't think we're even aware of all of them, but I mean, most people, when they think about coming out of grad school, they kind of think in two ways, maybe either staying in academia, trying to become a professor, doing a postdoc, or going into industry. But in reality, there's tons of different career paths that you can do with your PhD. I know some people currently in the program are interested in science communication, so becoming like a writer or an editor, or just communicating science to the public. Some people are even interested in science, science education and outreach and things like that. But really, there's a lot of different career paths that you can do with a PhD, and it's just, kind of up to you to explore and find what you're interested in.
That's good. Thank you. And so another question is, what has been the most exciting discovery you've made during your research? So maybe the three of you want to say something.
I mean, for me, this neurodevelopmental disorder that I'm studying hasn't really been looked at in terms of metabolism, and we found that it has a huge effect on the entire metabolism of the organism as well as the brain of the organism. So basically, I was able to open almost like a Pandora's box for all these questions we don't have any answers to. So it's been really exciting to me because I can kind of just pick and choose whatever I want to work on because it hasn't really been well studied.
I think for me, so I mentioned before, we try to make small molecule therapeutics for a lot of genetic diseases. So I work on myotonic dystrophy type 1, and one of the compounds that I was working on, we actually got to see some activity in a mouse model of the disease. So that was really exciting and kind of unexpected, but we were really happy that it worked out that way. So that's probably my best.
For me, I would say one of the first projects that I worked on in my postdoc was looking at how an antibody-like inhibitor that we developed in the lab interacts with the immune system. And so I showed that the interaction of a type of white blood cell called NK cells with HIV that's like budding from an infected cell, using this inhibitor can actually lead to the killing of infected cells. So we're really hoping that this can be used as kind of what's called a functional cure for HIV infected patients, where you can basically kill the infected cells and reduce the amount of virus that persists. And it would hopefully be better and more long-term than some of the antiviral medications that are out on the market. And I think, in the current crisis that we're facing with the coronavirus, what's been really interesting, and I don't know if exciting is the right word, but because I've worked on a number of different viruses throughout my career, being able to pivot to work on something that is really a pressing need right now has been really interesting and fulfilling for me.
That's great. Thank you for sharing all that. So we have three more questions. I think we can do all of them. So the first one, Valentina had mentioned that even if you struggle with chemistry concepts, that you can still succeed in science. What resources are available for students to keep pursuing and learning science despite their fear of failure? Anybody can jump into this one.
I have actually even like recently used some online courses to kind of refresh like my understanding of certain aspects of biology or chemistry or biochemistry. There's a lot of stuff on edx.com or .org, edX anyway, and Coursera. There's a lot of free stuff, so you can work on your own time and you don't have to worry about, completing all the tests or whatever that might be giving you anxiety in a course.
Ali, you wanted to say something too?
That's okay. Meredith answered it. Good.
I want to second what Meredith said. I think that everybody time to time needs refreshers. So yes. So the next question, what would you say is one of the most vital steps a high schooler should take to pursue a career in science? So Ali, you want to?
I think if you're in high school, kind of just staying interested and having that passion for science and wanting to learn more about science is really key. Once you get into undergraduate, then, you would think about what kind of major you want to choose, what specific scientific discipline you want to go into, and then maybe getting research experience. But in high school, there's not a ton of research experience. Like Meredith said, she used to go to science camp and stuff like that, but not many people have the opportunity to actually do research experience in high school. So when you're in high school, I would just encourage you to keep interested in learning as much as you can about science, and whether it's reading or just in your classes.
That's great.
Yeah. And I would add that even participating in this webinar is a good first step. Things like this are really helpful. You can talk to people that you might not be able to talk to in your normal day-to-day. So looking out for things like this. I know a lot of universities have these types of outreach events. And I think that there are people that would be interested to talk to you no matter where you are, to help you understand and move along your career.
Great. So Valentina, maybe you want to tackle this one. What was the application process for grad school like? So I know that you did this a couple of years ago. So
Yeah, so I guess it varies depending on the type of institution you're applying to in the program. For me, I started applying a year before I actually wanted to attend grad school, which I was able to do that because I had the resources to do that. So some applications are free and some of them you actually have to pay for. But I started a year in advance because you have to take GREs for some schools and not for others. And you also have to write a lot of, I guess, like research statements or personal statements. And so you basically apply, and then you're either invited to the campus in order to meet the professors and have an in-person interview before you actually accept to the school. And that can look different for every institution. And I think that's basically the easy way to describe it.
I'll just add off of that when you're looking at different grad schools, it's really important also to look at specific professors and specific labs there, so that you're prepared when you go interview, and so that you also know which labs you might want to work in. So that's a key step of getting ready to apply for grad school, is to just research all of the specific labs that universities you're interested in applying to.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely have more than one choice in each institution.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah. So the last one is, I want to apply for a PhD, but I'm worried I will get stuck for years. What does getting a PhD look like, and why does it take years? That's a great question.
Yeah, so I think, again, this is something that varies by program and institution, but it does take a lot of time and effort. Usually the first year or two of a program are taking courses, and you'll do lab rotations. So you'll do a few weeks or a couple of months working in different labs with different professors to get an idea of what type of lab you want to be joining. And then after you finish your courses, then you're basically doing research full time, and you have to come up with some type of original publication in order to prove that you've fulfilled your thesis, basically. So that's what can take a lot of time. But again, it varies. So I finished my PhD in 5 years, which is kind of the, I guess, lower end of average. It's usually between like 5 and 7, I would say, depending on the program and what's going on.
Anybody else wants to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to think about school as like one linear path, and what you learn really easily in science and just like your everyday, or it's like you're not always going to find the answer to the question you want. So that takes time. And if you've been working on something for, let's say, 4 months and it fails, or it didn't go the way you wanted it to, or it didn't even give you any actual information, those are 4 months that you're now going to have to put into something else. And that's why it varies so much between people and departments and institutions. So it really is very individualized to you.
Great. So I see that we're running out of time. So maybe there's an opportunity if you want to give any final remarks. This will be the moment.
I guess I just kind of have one thing to add to the preparing to apply for a PhD. Allie and I both went straight from undergrad into our PhD programs, but Val took a year and did like a technician or internship sort of thing. So there are opportunities with just a bachelor's degree where you can work in a lab and get paid and get more experience. And so I've noticed a lot of people, we've had a lot of technicians come through our lab that are going through that process, and it's really been very helpful. But I think just, stick with it and try not to get frustrated. And if it's something that you're interested in, then keep with it and go for it.
That's great advice. Well, thank you so much for being our panelists today. I think that all the attendees enjoyed it and they learned a lot from you. I want to let our attendees know that this video is going to be posted later in the week on our website. And if you have any other questions, you can provide us the questions and we'll ask our panelists or other of our scientists. There are more resources on our website. At this point, let's get the third and final poll. This is for getting to know how we did overall and if you liked it. And I want to remind everybody that after this, we're going to, when we close the call, there's going to be a survey coming up. And we also appreciate if you can take that survey, and that's going to help us in the future. There's a place where you can add other topics that you want to hear about. And we're planning on having more webinars throughout the summer and then again in the fall. So please, we can use all the feedback in the world, since we're doing this for you, the participants. And I see that most of you already shared your responses. We're happy that you liked the panel today. And with that, I want to thank our panelists again. Let everybody know that we're going to have other webinars on Thursday. We're having an experiment demo on chromatography, and on next Tuesday, we're going to be talking about internships. So our panelists today spoke a lot about how internships are important to get started in research. So we're going to bring interns at different stages, and even a grad student who did an internship with us. So if this is something that interests you, please join us, and it will be at the same time. Thank you so much, Val, Allie, and Meredith for your participation today. And with that, I'll see you next time.